So our study looks at U.S. physician perspectives on biosimilar substitution and reimbursement practices. The Alliance for Safe Biologic Medicines sponsored these studies. So our background indicates that biologic medicines are used to treat chronic diseases in rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, etc. These are complex diseases, they're chronic patients, and they tend to be very expensive. So biosimilars were created as highly similar but not identical medicines because the molecules are so large, it would be hard to do that. But the idea is to drive lower prices and create competition. The high cost of biologics incentivizes patients to change their coverage policies to try and save a dollar, make a dollar, etc. So the idea is that patients could get lower cost treatments. So while these medicines are safe and effective, treatment plans are not universal. The core of the doctor-patient relationship is that a patient, a complex patient particularly, comes in over years, and it often takes a long time to figure out what the best treatment is. So we come up with this treatment plan in agreement, an informed consent process, if you will. Patients often try multiple products before they come to the one that works best for them. So physicians and patients express concerns about unnecessarily switching, particularly if the patient's stable and has been that way for a while. They have their life back, they're working, they're doing their family life, and they don't want that interrupted. It's a fearful thing. The US FDA has addressed these concerns by creating an extra category of interchangeable biosimilars. So while a biosimilar is similar and you can change, if you want to make multiple changes, an interchangeable has to have additional studies to show that there are no negative impacts to doing that. They've also adopted a naming suffix. They put 4 letters at the end, say CDDY or something, so that we can look at the generic with that addition, so we can track different biosimilars. The idea is if there's a bad outcome or something, we'll be able to track that back to the factory, to the distribution, et cetera, and find out what's going on, because adverse reporting is really necessary in pharmacovigilance. So then the objective of the study is we took 401 U.S. physicians from 12 different specialties, all biosimilar prescribers, and looked at survey questions, which were done by a third party. And we looked at practices on switching, third-party switching, cost and coverage decision-making, and the implications of FDA interchangeability and naming policies. Just as a note, this is a series of 13 surveys done over the last 12 years. So while this shows this survey's data, there's additional insights to be obtained by comparing the trends over time. How are things changing with time as we become more and more familiar with biosimilars? And this link down here will do that. 92% of respondents expressed confidence in the safety and efficacy, meaning they feel that it works. 89% would prescribe a biosimilar to a new, which is what we call bio-naive patient. They've not seen biologics before. But we drop down when we start looking at concerns here that 80% are comfortable switching a stable patient to a biosimilar because we have these anxieties and concerns about possibly destabilizing the patient. This still looks at the doctor-patient relationship, but additional discomfort comes out when we look at who is in control of these treatment decisions. A majority, 58%, are uncomfortable with third-party substitution for non-medical reasons. In other words, saving money, making money, things like that. 69% of U.S. physicians surveyed it was important or critical that patients and physicians decide the most suitable biologic, whether it's the original or the biosimilar. And 67% of respondents thought it was very important or critical that they're able to block or prevent a substitution if they feel it's inappropriate. When we look at drug studies, oftentimes those patients are fairly homogeneous. They're maybe not the most complex patients. As an aside, 8 to 10% of people with a biologic disorder like Crohn's disease could have rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, celiac, or other immune diseases. So while we're looking at the medication for the studied disease, we get a little concerned when we have other things in there. And then the studies often don't look at other things such as arthritis complaints, et cetera. They only look at the intestinal diseases, in my case, in the GI world. So that's where some of these anxieties come from, but that's not part of this study. When you look at payment or reimbursement practices, 71% thought it was highly important that payers should reimburse multiple products. There should be a choice for patients and physicians here. This if you look at the other studies, you can see that those considerations are going up. And 74% wanted the ability to throw other factors in besides financing. Are there other reasons for not doing it? A simple example might be, well, between switching products, one's an injection, one's an infusion. Is it better, easier? Is it more accessible for patients? So access to care is also important, not just which medication. So then what is the preferred biosimilar access scenario? 81% of patients believe they'd best be served following a Western European multiple product model. So you have the biosimilar, you have the originator, and you can choose between them. In Canada, they have a single product picked out, and only 8% support this model, and then 11% are unsure. I don't want to extrapolate why, but again, it's a U.S. survey, and so going over Canadian practices could create some uncertainty there for the respondents. And then what is the answer to this? Well, we also then looked then at the biosimilar naming system. By doing the tracking and being able to read an article or studies that list the biosimilar with that unique identifier, we'll be able to look at things that are going on and say, okay, that product has a different issue. There were actually cases when this first started where we couldn't track the biosimilars completely. So this is something that needs to be cleaned. What I will say is that the FDA is requiring that suffix for new products. So I think that's going forward. And then finally, I mentioned before interchangeables, and that seems to be producing confidence among physicians. If you have this ability to switch and it's been studied and there's additional data, 57% of people feel they're more likely to actually prescribe an interchangeable. So they would do that maybe over an originator. And 59%, or similar number, are more comfortable with a pharmacy level substitution. I wrote one product, but they're switching it to something that seems to be the same in terms of treatment effects. So we are comfortable with that. So our conclusions then, U.S. physicians are comfortable prescribing biosimilars, and if switching, if they can do that. The majority maintain that when they and their patients have control over the decision, they're okay with that. The majority continue to have concerns with third-party initiated switching. And I actually ask you to go back and look some of those old studies to see how these trends change. I think you'll find that with familiarity and more biosimilar programs coming in place, people are actually more conservative than they were originally. They want to see those additional data. Majority of physicians are not worried about the FDA's use of a suffix. We don't feel that it makes the product inferior, but it does help us track and see what's going on. And interchangeability shows promise because it may be an effective way of addressing concerns of physicians. Again, they are stakeholders with the patients and driving the treatment decisions. This interchangeability designation makes the majority of respondents more comfortable prescribing and exchanging those patients at the pharmacy.